everyone. Welcome back to In Session with Beth and Steph. I'm Beth. I'm a speech and language therapist.
And I'm Steph. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist.
All right. So if you've been with us in our previous episodes, we talk about what we do in general as OT and SLT. And then we also talked about what we do in the schools, how we plan programs, and how we collaborate with the teachers. Today's episode is all about communication, which I love. But yeah, we'll be diving into what communication means, why it's important for every child, and not just those that are neurodivergent, for adults as well, I think. And how both of us approach this in therapy.
Yeah. So, Beth, when you talk about communication, what do you mean from a speech therapist perspective when it comes to what is communication?
Right. So, of course, I mean, it's very self-explanatory when you say speech therapy, but a lot of parents would always think it's for children to speak better, talk better, which is actually really true. But when we say communication, it's more than just words. It involves even gestures, pointing. It's a way of sharing a message and really getting your emotions, feelings, requests, anything like that across to another person or to another or to a receiver. So that's kind of like what's communication in a nutshell for speech. What about you, Steph? For an OT perspective.
Yeah, I really like what you said about getting a message across, because if we think about communication, it's part of basically our participation, being able to participate in everyday life. And that's what OT is all about, like that independence or that ability to be able to participate. And when it comes to communication, it's from an OT perspective, it's letting someone know where you're at, number one, and like in a situation, in a particular environment during a particular task, but also to be able to, for OT, we need to get a child ready to communicate. So communication, when you think about, you want to get a message across, you want to be able to talk, but is that child ready? Are they in the right state of mind, state of body to be able to communicate? And what is that environment? Is that environment allowing a child to communicate? And is the task also affecting the way a child can communicate? So there's a lot that you can delve in from OT perspective, because I think for parents it's tough when I talk about, okay, we're going to work on how they communicate, and communication is there, and, what are their social skills like? They're like, no, but that's speech. And I'm like, it is, you're not wrong, but there is a way that OT can support them in that. So,
And I feel like a lot of the times, and this is why, we talk about it multiple times before, and even in our own conversations, that it would be nice to have the OT sessions before the speech sessions. And the school, of course, that's very limiting, but in clinic, that's quite recommended, actually, at least for me. Because the OT then gets to, we won't say the word regulate, but then prepare them for a much more communication-focused session in the next block of their day. So, but let's talk about communication in a more functional sense. Like in an everyday life setting. And, as an OT, you do everyday life things all the time. So at least for me, for example, a child needs help or needs to request something. So they can say, I need help, or I want this, instead of crying, hitting, or running around, running about. It also involves like maybe pointing. Some children will do signs. If they hand lead, if they lead your hand, that's already functional communication. That's already a sign for you that, oh, he's understanding that the cause and effect of communication, if I do this, then this happens, instead of engaging in behavior, or a child really not knowing what to do or how to get his message or her message across. So what about for you?
I think for me, like functional communication comes into play with every activity. So being able to say, I'm all done with my food, or being able to communicate in that way. I'm all done with my food, or I can't do this task, or I need a break when I'm in school, I'm not able to focus for this task. How is a child communicating that to us? And, what are they doing, and how are we enabling them, should I say, to communicate that message to us? So I think functionally communication in OT is in everything that we do. So how are they communicating? I need to go to the restroom. I'm hungry. Or, those aren't only in speaking, but like what they are doing and being able to understand what they're doing. So I think like for me, the best functional example is when a child, maybe they aren't able to talk, use words.
Yeah.
In class, but you can see that they are not able to attend. How are they presenting themselves to us? What are they leading us to that's showing us, should I say, that they need a break, that they need to regulate, that they are not at the right arousal level to be able to attend to what's in front of them. So functionally, I think that's a big one that we see in schools, and that we need to just advocate for our kids to tell the parent, tell the teacher, this is happening. This is what they're trying to tell you. Let's look out for this next time.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of people miss that bit about OT is because communication, like I said, everyone focuses on the speech aspect of it, or the speech therapist's role in it. But like you said, there's a lot of times I would be like, if the child is either not aroused enough or overstimulated, I'd be like, what are you trying to tell me? I can't get to any of my goals. Yeah. So even in that sense, you want to understand that how it comes into play, how OT is really important in this, I think, goal as a general functional skill that we want to develop.
Yeah. So, Beth, what are some communication goals that you would have for a child in speech?
Right. So like any other goal, if you're working on whatever area of their speech language, you go depending on the child's needs, of course. But it could go from like building sentences to first maybe using one-word communication or one-word vocabulary to communicate something, to express a thought, a feeling, a request. And then you want to build on that vocabulary, combine the words together. And then you always tie it to something functional, like requesting, asking for help, commenting or reacting in play and things like that. But one thing that I think most people have questions is about is when do you start those goals, or when? So for a child, let's say, for example, a nonverbal or non-speaking child comes to me in assessment. And there's really so we have skills called pre-language, or before you develop your language skills. And there's none of that, but they're starting to communicate. Like they're trying to engage with you. They're trying to pull your hand to something. So those are all their nonverbal communication. From that point on, that this child is ready to communicate. They understand that, they need to tell mama something. Yeah. So you want to equip them with those kind of like tools in order for them to communicate. So that could be either words, pictures, gesture, and all of those things are called AAC. So anything aside from spoken communication is an alternative or augmentative communication system, which we're going to talk about later on. But so you want to introduce them depending on the child's needs and depending on their skill level at the moment. And you kind of just build on that as you go. Yeah. So, but what about in OT? Like, how do you incorporate those communication goals in your OT goals as well?
So when it comes to OT, and we've mentioned this quite a few times, when I'm dealing with my goals, especially now related to communication, I'm going to speak to you or the SLP. Reason being is because if I have goals that are related to, for instance, just their social skills, being able to interact with another person, and that doesn't relate to Bethany's goals, where her goals are related to any type of AAC, that we're not going to reach any sort of functional goal together. So again, it does depend, but in the beginning, or what my goals are related to, are often the readiness for communication. So if a child is not ready to communicate, but like getting them to the right point before they start communicating. Yes. So we've spoken about it before, is regulation. Yeah. So is the child at the right level of regulation, the right level of arousal to be able to communicate? So as Bethany mentioned, when we see kids in the clinic, we often, I will see them first and then they'll go straight to Miss Bethany afterwards. And yes, I will try and regulate them, get them ready for Bethany's session. But sometimes there are these kids, I'm like, Beth, you're not having the best day. I am preparing you, and this is how you should interact with them.
She's regulating me as well.
Regulating you to get ready to help this child. And so then again, so regulation, what level of arousal, or how do you know where a child is at. Are they at a low level of arousal? Are they at a heightened level of arousal? And then how do we get them back so that they can communicate? And I think often parents are like, I try and talk to them, but they're just so heightened and they're so frustrated that I can't get anything across. And I'm like, okay, then don't even worry about communicating it. Let that happen later. Let's start getting them to the right level. Let's introduce our sensory strategies that we've spoken about, our sensory diet, and then communicate. Get them ready to communicate. And I think that's super important. And, you know, when it comes to AAC, one of the other things that we look at is the access. Can they actually access whatever they need to be able to communicate with you? May it be, do they have the executive functioning skills to be able to follow this amount of instructions? Do they have the fine motor ability to press or remove the visual aid, whatever the AAC that the SLP is introducing? Do they have those skills? Do they have
tracking?
Exactly. Can they find what they need? How many things do we need to, how many pictures can we introduce? And do they know what those pictures mean?
Yeah.
But that's what we collaborate a lot on that. So yeah, there's so many goals, but again, we need to see like, where is this child at? What is our long-term goal? And then let's implement our short-term goals. Let's implement our access goal, our postural goal, our fine motor goal, our sensory goal, but for that child. So there's a lot that needs to happen before we should expect any sort of message to come to us from that child.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it goes hand in hand because like we said, there are a lot of skills involved in introducing a certain kind of AAC, which we're going to talk about a little later. And a lot of those come from the OT's perspective, or if the child is heavily physically, has limitations physically, they also consult the physio about it, the neurologist about it. So all of it is very collaborative. I like what you said about like finding the right level. We talk about regulation quite a lot, but finding the right level of arousal or the right level in which they're communicating. Because more than for the kids, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, for adults as well. Do you know how, like, when you have, I don't know, a heightened conversation with someone and you're going to be like, I don't want to communicate right now because my emotions are too high, or,
exactly.
so it's kind of like that. You want to get to a place where I can communicate better, because if I force it right now, it's not going to come out the way that, that's beneficial for anybody. And that's the same with kids. If you force communication in a state where they're not ready to communicate or not in the right space for it, then it's not going to be beneficial. It's going to frustrate you, the child, and like the therapist or anybody else that's around, because there's no communication. It becomes a chore. It becomes a bit of work, a demand, rather than a functional everyday thing.
Exactly. Right. I think also like there's this anticipation when you've already been frustrated. I've been there. Like, I've already gotten frustrated with this situation with a child where I'm like, I'm not doing this the right way. I'm annoyed with myself.
Yeah.
I don't want the child to be annoyed. And I think we can build it up so much in our heads when we just need to break it down, like get to the foundations first and like have that solidified. Like, I'll tell parents, like, they'll be like, okay, let's implement the sensory diet. Can we knock this out in like 2-3 weeks? And I'm like, no, we're starting off with 1. We're solidifying that skill or that ability or that exposure to it. And then we move on from there. It's the same thing with communication. Like, just get the foundations down, okay, I need to get my child calm, and I don't like the word calm, get my child regulated. And then when you've gotten that, you've done that for a couple of weeks, then it's just becomes so natural. And then you take the next step. So All
right. Now we're going to talk about what AAC is. We've mentioned AAC multiple times earlier, but what really is it, or what does it mean? So AAC is one of my favorite things to work on, actually. It means augmentative and alternative communication. So most parents, and this is like, let's say 8 out of 10 parents who come for assessments, when I say, do you know what would help if we introduce a device? And they get really scared about this, like, iPad app. So they always think, oh, is that gonna, delay the speech even further or give up on the speech? No, actually, AAC supports it and can even improve speech. So at least my practice for the last 10, 11 years, and with my mentors who've taught me the practice of AAC itself, it was just amazing to see like, oh, that actually does not happen. They've actually started to communicate even better, because now you're breaking that barrier.
Yeah.
You're lessening the frustration of like, I can't communicate to you, but I'm giving you an avenue to do that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, sorry. Because we introduced the device. The only reason I do that a lot is because it's so accessible. Everyone has an iPad. It's not as affordable, I know that, but it's more like embedded into society.
Yeah.
Whereas you have other types of AAC like Macathon, Gesture, PEX, which is a picture exchange. You have laminated photos on a Velcro board. Those are very good. They are not as accessible for everyone in the environment. I can't imagine a parent going to a restaurant with a binder filled with pictures.
Yeah.
As opposed to a parent with an iPad.
Yeah.
Do you know? So that's kind
You
of like
get like low tech, high tech, like
yes. And we're gonna talk about the kinds later on.
I got you excited.
Yeah. But yeah, so a lot of those times when somebody says AAC, they think iPad, and the parent is like, but that's already talking for them, and that's going to impede their speech.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of other things also, and it again, most often than not, improves the communication, the speech, than delays it. Yeah.
So Beth, we spoke about what AAC is, and you mentioned that there are different types. So can you explain those types to us again?
Very briefly.
Yeah.
There's a low tech, mid tech, and high tech type of AAC.
Okay.
So gesture, sign language, communication boards, those are low tech. Well, sign language doesn't have tech, but kind of like anything that has printables, pictures, and things like that. Those are considered low tech. Then you have your mid tech ones. They're apps as well, but they're single message buttons. So you have like things like Go Talk, or where you just press it and it just says one word or whatever it is. And then you have your high tech ones like the Pro Loco, the Touch Chat. They're the ones that they are really speech generating at this point. You can there's a massive array of vocabulary in everyday life depending on the child's need. You can adapt that app, the vocabulary, into what's relevant to the child's life. Because I think that's one of the differences I saw is with low tech, it really just is there. You can insert vocabulary, but it can't make it into sentences, and it's not as the choices aren't as wide. So as the child grows older, you want to increase that vocabulary, and the high tech one helps in that a lot. It's also speech generating. So there are devices, like Stephen Hawking, where it's just like he kind of like presses a button and then it just says the sentence for him. So those are high tech ones, which I think all of them work really well. It depends on the family's lifestyle and the family's preference, and then the child's style, communication style as well. So yeah, the key is matching the child to the right device.
Really important.
And with those matching, when you're matching a child to a particular, not just device, particular AEC, a lot of those skills are addressed by the OT. Yeah. So how do you kind of like embed, or how do you prepare a child? How do you see which child matches what AAC, if this is an appropriate AAC for them? What are the skills involved in that?
I think the most important thing to remember with OT and, using AAC, like 80% of it is just supporting the ability to use the AAC, right? So I'm definitely not going to train a child on how to use an AAC and what comes first and what goes next. I'm going to have Beth teach me how to use it for that particular child. But where I'm saying support, I'm talking about especially now if Beth or anyone is going to be teaching a child how to use an AAC, are they ready to learn how to use an AAC? So, sometimes I'll see LSAs or teachers or whoever it is trying to use the AAC with the child, but the child is not ready to use it, not ready to learn something new. They're not at that level to do it yet. So we have to, number one, see what is this child ready to learn and how am I supporting them to learn? Is it that I need to use, while they're learning, a type of supportive setting, maybe a wobble cushion, a different type of chair, a weighted lap pad to get them to that level of, okay, I'm ready to take in what you're saying and actually hold that information. It's not just words that are around me, I like to say to parents, when you're talking to your child, when you're telling a child that, their behavior is not okay, whatever the situation is, but they're not ready to take that in, the words are just floating around them. Like if you can picture a cartoon, nothing is going in, nothing is being accepted, nothing is being held, it's just there. So getting to that right level of learning or right level of arousal to learn is super important. And there's things like posture that comes into play, because posture affects how much attention we can give to a situation. The way that the task is presented to them it doesn't need to be presented at a lower level, a higher level. I'm thinking about our cortical visual impairment kids. Like how do I need to, present this to them? Then we think about, fine motor skills. If I'm introducing one of our low-tech devices with the pictures, can I take that picture that they need to take off and actually put it?
There's quite a grip that you need for Velcro.
It's Velcro, yeah. So do they have a pincer grasp to actually grab it? Do they have the shoulder motion to actually get it to where they need to put? Do they have those things? If they don't, that's not the appropriate thing for the child. We need to try something else. Do they have, for instance, what are their visual scanning abilities? What are their perceptual abilities? Do we need to decrease the amount of things that we're presenting to them to get them to actually communicate effectively, right? Then if we think about, so we've mentioned things like regulation, fine motor skills, access, but what about from an OT perspective, it's not just the child that's learning this, right?
Yes.
I need to learn it. Yeah. And for each child that we see, they use different things. So I need to learn all of them. And also not just learn all of them, but which one does the child know? And then also make sure that, and we've mentioned it before, make sure that it can be embedded into their lifestyle and that the parent can use it, the nanny can use it, that whoever the caregiver is at that moment can use it, and whatever they're doing, if they're going to school, it can be used. If they're not at school, if they're at a play area, which one can they use? It's all got to fit in their lifestyle, but then also not be a burden to their lifestyle. And I think that's the biggest thing, that the taboo that AAC brings in, is that it's a burden, it's an extra thing. When it's not, it's not a crutch, it's a support.
It's a tool. It's
exactly.
A tool, that you use.
Yeah.
I like what you said about it has to be embedded in their lives, because most often that. So I have nothing against Makaton and sign language being used for children that are hearing. So usually we use sign language, ESL, FSL, American Sign Language, Makaton for British Sign Language, for deaf kids or kids with hearing impairment. That's true. Sometimes that's used for kids with autism, nonverbals, but do they have the fine motor skills for it? That's first the question I always ask is, you're teaching this child Makaton. Are they able to adequately or accurately sign that? Because then you're just creating random gestures that. So remember, in AAC and in any type of sign language, you're teaching a language. This has to be a language used by the people in the school, the people everyone around the child, basically. The people at home, most especially. If you're not using the same language, it's like I'm teaching the child Spanish and the rest of the family is speaking in English. So what is the point of that? So if I say, just one example, I had a child sign. So toilet is this, but they would sign it in a different way, because they can't, that kind of the reach, the bilateral, do you call it bilateral? That reach for that, you can't do it. So it's a completely sign altogether, but then the person teaching would be like, oh, he's the toilet. You're the only person who understood that. What's that going to do for his social skills, for his overall communications when you're not around? So that's kind of what's important, is really understanding how the rest of the people in that child's life also learn and use the language you're trying to teach, because then it doesn't make sense otherwise.
And also when you mention sign language and the fine motor skills, I think we're when we speak about a certain type of device, we're but this is the easiest device, let's just use this device. I get where you're coming from. It's the easiest device to use.
It's accessible, sure.
But are we going to increase the child's cognitive load when they have to do something they can't do? So when I speak about cognitive load, I speak about if a child needs to sign, right? They need to sign all done. They need to sign more. If the child isn't able to meet their midline, if they don't have the wrist ability to do this, they need their brains need to do more to be able to say, okay, I need to.
There's
move
so much
my
more
wrist.
processing involved
So much.
cognitively.
So the cognitive load, it's not worth like then hindering communication.
Yeah.
Because it's so much more, okay, I'm just not going to communicate. It's so much effort.
Yeah.
You need me to sign something with my hands. I can't do that movement. Now I have to think more about wrist, do this, hand turn. That's what it basically is for kids with coordination issues, with,
goodness.
limited fine motor ability. That's what it feels like to them. But it doesn't feel like that to us. But even though it's the easiest thing,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, cognitive load.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about how we want, kind of like adapt communication styles or different ways to communicate functionally in their daily lives. And part of a child's daily life is, of course, their school life, their academic life. And, for speech, at least, communication affects all areas, of course.
Yeah.
Academically, they might fall behind if they're not able to communicate or receive communication the way that that's easy for them or easily, accessible for them. So yeah, they might fall behind with their lessons or even act out behaviorally. Most of the time in the school, when they get the referral of like, he's doing this and he's doing that, a lot of the times is because of the limitations in communication rather than understanding the concepts of academic lessons. So yeah, so it kind of like affects that as well, of course. I mean, it's very self-explanatory, but the details into it, sometimes, people don't look beyond that, beyond the academic falling out or beyond not understanding this lesson. So yeah, but what about you? Like for a functional daily living aspect?
I think for me, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about the effect that, limited communication has is that it limits their ability to advocate for themselves. And not advocate as in like, I need this. Simple advocacy of like, my tummy hurts. I just fell. But like, you're bleeding and, we don't know how it happened or, something we can prevent in the future. If they can't tell you what's going on internally or what they're feeling, I think that's a big one. And, with kids, they learn from each other. And people sometimes say like, why do we need to deal with social skills? And, why do we need to deal with it? Why do they need to have, a particular play skill for a particular?
Yeah.
Because there's different types of play skills, right? There's different types of levels that they need to be at for a particular age. And the reason it's important is because kids learn from each other when they play. And if a child isn't able to communicate something as simple as, can I join you in your play? Can we play together? Can I have a turn next with that? Like, how they're not going to be able to join in, not going to be able to learn from each other. So I think that for me is really important when it comes to communication. Yeah. And I think that's why communication is so much more than just speaking, talking to someone. It's about being able to be independent, advocate for yourself, connect with someone, relate to others.
Right.
If I'm not able to get a message across that, something simple as like, I want mommy and daddy, or, and that's not just about talking, it's being able to go to them and, tell them that I want to spend time with you, or gesture to them to come with me to my play area. And I think for OT, that's really something from a young age, not even from, and the younger kids that I work with, I always tell their parents, it's not just about getting them to do tummy time, getting them to do something. So when we support regulation, when we support fine motor ability, posture, all of these things, we make communication so much easier. And I think that's what I want to get across from an OT perspective. It's not for me about being able to talk, but being ready to communicate.
So exactly. So like you said, I think it's important to understand that as well. But more than that, it's important to understand that a lot of kids have different communication styles. It's not a one size fit all. And it's not always about talking. I say that quite a few times in like my practice in itself. Some children communicate in different ways, not just neurodivergent ones, but even neurotypical ones. They communicate in pictures. Some child would be very eloquent saying sentences. I was like that when I was a child because I grew up with such older people. But there are some children who would communicate in more broken kind of like words, but then have very good sense of gesture and pointing and all of that. So every sort of communication, every type of communication should be welcome. Every effort should be celebrated, especially for kids who don't normally communicate. And yeah, just understanding the type of communication this child has, whether or not it's a device, whether or not it's words or sentences, it manages our expectation and it lessens your frustration on both ends, because sometimes we get frustrated, the child gets frustrated, and that's the least thing that you want to do, and especially in therapy. So yeah.
So I think the message that we want to get across to teachers, parents, and therapists, anyone that's watching, is that communication isn't just about talking. It's about independence. It's about connection. It's about participation in everyday life. And yeah, I hope that we've brought that across quite clearly, and how both of us have a role as therapists, speech therapists, and an OT in helping our kids with this. And yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and follow us on our social media page on Instagram, In Session with Beth and Steph, and Spotify and YouTube. And we'll be posting a little bit more about communication and our roles as therapists.
All right.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks.
We'll see you soon,
guys. Bye.
Bye.